Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining. In this video, we're taking a look at Deathbringer with its Catalyst. Now, I am very late to this one, so apologies for that, but it did come in second place in the poll a few weeks ago as what you, the viewers, would like to see tested after fusion rifles. So here we are, eventually, sleeper simulant aside. Now, I've tested this on its own, then with Breach and Clear, then with the seasonal Argent Ordnance mod, and finally with both Breach and Clear and Argent Ordnance again. I'd like to manage expectations now and say this is the last time I'll be testing anything with Breach and Clear, and probably any seasonal mods for that matter, since they are going away soon. So being compared to base Deathbringer numbers, so no seasonal mods, will be a time loss Hezen Vengeance with impact casing, overflow, vorpal weapon and an adept big one spec, and then tomorrow's answer with impact casing, field prep, clown cartridge and a major spec mod. Both have been tested on their own and then paired with Witherhoard. I just want to confirm that again, these are not with any artifact mods, only Deathbringer is. And that's because I had a lot of the Deathbringer numbers tested and finished almost 2 weeks ago, so I'm just going to include them anyway. Now the usual testing standards apply, that being one loader mod was used and nothing to increase reserves. Chapters are in the progress bar for you to move to the bits that interest you most, but I need to start with the testing methods for Deathbringer, followed by a quick look at what the Catalyst does, and then followed by all the usual number stuff. So, testing Deathbringer and trying to repeat results. I imagine this is what it feels like to try and herd cats. So there are two main factors that cause this to be extremely inconsistent, that being the path of the orbs when they appear from the main projectile and the movement of the target below, and secondly, which is more dependent on the player, direction and height when firing and when you release the fire button, i.e. distance. With all these factors taken into consideration, it's very hard to use consistently, not to mention test it. Therefore, to remove the randomness that's introduced mainly because of the 7 orbs and the tracking, I'm going to be using the clip coming onto screen now, and assuming the time it takes for all orbs to impact from the moment of firing will be identical to this. So, starting at the frame of fire from Deathbringer, it's taken 3.85 seconds for the first orb to impact, and a further 2.27 seconds before the final orb had impacted. Ignore the one that hits the wall, it would have hit Carl anyway and before the final orb, so I'm going to include it anyway. Applying this same structures at every round fired in every timing test and graph subject means the only randomness introduced into the test is how quickly I press reload, and then fire again afterwards, etc., which is something that's present in every test. Doing it this way also means we can more confidently compare the different DPS numbers directly for each example. I'm also going to assume every orb impacts and does full damage. Also, something that was pointed out to me by a viewer, you can actually reload Deathbringer while still holding the fire button down and detonate the projectile upon release during the reload animation. This will help get each round out a little faster. Now, the Catalyst, what does it do? From what I can see, it just reduces the amount of time the orb needs to be airborne for before doing maximum damage. You'll also know when it does that max damage as the numbers are yellow. The description on the Catalyst implies they don't need to fall as far, but I don't think it matters how far they fall, just how long they're in the air. Remember, some orbs when created move horizontally at first and do full damage once they drop and hit the target, while an orb that's fallen the same distance but has gone straight down, meaning it's not airborne for as long, won't do max damage. But the fall height is technically the same. Basically what I'm saying is it feels like orb damage is dependent on time, not distance, and the Catalyst reduces the time before max damage. What I've found though, particularly against Carl, who's quite a small target, is that aiming a little too low might still be enough for orbs to do max damage, but sometimes the outside ones that move more horizontally at the start tend to hit the ground first. Just something to bear in mind. So onto the number stuff with Deathbringer on its own first. Each orb can do 22,134 and there are 7 orbs, meaning damage per round has a maximum potential of 154,938. 7 rounds can be held in reserves, so total damage was 1,084,566. For the timings, well, I'll show the clip on screen that they're based off, but remember the impact of the orbs at the end won't match with when the clock stops, as I'm using the same time period as when all orbs are hitting Carl. Whenever that final round is fired, the timer will always stop 6.12 seconds after, which is the total time for all orbs to impact from the moment of firing, or at least in the clip I'm using it is. With that in mind, total time came in at 22.79 seconds and therefore DPS 47,590. Take every number regarding Deathbringer other than orb damage with an extremely large pinch of salt. And now Deathbringer with Breach and Clear. Damage per orb has now increased by 30% to a maximum potential of 28,774. As before, there are 7 orbs, meaning damage per round if all orbs do full damage is 201,418. And therefore, for 7 rounds, total damage is 1,409,926. For this particular test, I'll be sticking with Truth Teller like all other Breach and Clear examples I've done before, which did 32,895 per round, of which 2 were fired. This brings the total potential damage to 1,475,716. For the timings, start with a round from Deathbringer and detonate the round when above the target, then quickly switch to the grenade launcher and fire to activate Breach and Clear before the orbs from the first round impact. Switch back to Deathbringer, which will now be reloaded. Fire 4 rounds, but after firing the 4th, stay with the rocket launcher and detonate without reloading. Then it's quickly back to Truth Teller to reproc Breach and Clear, followed by the final 2 rounds from the exotic rocket launcher. Total time for this, which is basically tested as 6.12 seconds after the final round is fired, came in at 22.54 seconds, meaning DPS is 65,471. Moving on now to Deathbringer with the Argent Ordnance mod. For this, I just tested with 2 stacks of Charged with Light. Now this mod, after readying the launcher, increases the damage of each rocket and increases reload speed. Damage at a combatant will then reduce your Charged with Light stack by 1. Meaning for this test, I just applied the damage buff to the first 2 rounds. Now, this mod will stack, and for that, I've just used 2 as well. For one mod, max damage per orb increases to 26,561, which is 20%, while 2 mods increase damage to 27,667, which is 25%. This means the potential damage per round for the first 2 is 193,669, followed by 5 at normal damage. This brings total damage for this test to 1,162,028. For the timings, the method is identical to normal Deathbringer, only the first 2 reloads are slightly faster. The reload speed didn't reduce the total by much, but this could have just been inconsistencies on my part. Despite that, total time was still slightly less at 22.54 seconds, meaning DPS came in at 51,554. Now to pair the previous 2 together, Breach and Clear and Charged with Light. For the first 2 rounds, the damage increase for these is compounded. What this means is there's a 25% buff from Argent Ordnance, but the 30% buff from Breach and Clear isn't applied to base numbers, but rather the already buff numbers due to the Charged with Light mod. So while you might think 25% and 30% is 55%, the increase is actually 62.5%. Damage per orb here came in at 35,967 at its full potential. Therefore, damage for each of the first 2 rounds was 251,769. Now, just think about that for a minute. Over 250,000 damage for a single round. Of course, the downside is Deathbringer being inconsistent and having a substantial delay before it starts inflicting damage, but still, that's incredibly impressive. This means damage for 7 rounds is 1,510,628. This is with Breach and Clear, so add 2 rounds from Truth Teller, and total damage came in at 1,576,418. The method is identical to the normal Breach and Clear method, so I won't waste any time explaining that again, with the only difference being the slightly reduced time for the first 2 reloads. This entire method came in at 21.97 seconds, therefore DPS was 71,753. And now for Hezen Vengeance on its own. This has Impact Casing, Overflow and Vorpal Weapon. Damage per round consisted of 21,647 impact and 68,958 blast, for a total of 90,605. I could hold a total of 7 in reserves, meaning total damage came in at 634,235. For the method, I've only included Overflow for the first mag, or chamber, meaning you start with 2. There are some tricks you can do with special ammo finishers where you pile up special ammo bricks in one space and then move around after firing 2 rounds. This can allow you to fire 4, 6 or maybe even 8 rockets without reloading. The longer you go on for though, the harder it is to set up. I'll touch back on this method during the graph though. Anyway, total time for 7 rockets, starting with 2 in the opening mag only, was 15.65 seconds, meaning DPS was 40,526. And now for tomorrow's answer on its own, with impact casing, field prep and clown cartridge. Damage per round consisted of 18,824 impact and 59,963 blast, for a total of 78,787. With field prep, I was able to hold 8 rounds, which means total damage came in at 630,296. Now, due to clown cartridge, there were 2 rounds in every mag or chamber. So for the method, I've started with 2 in the opening mag, meaning there will be 4 mags in total, each with 2 rockets. I was also crouched for all testing to benefit from the increased reload speed granted by field prep. Time to fire all rounds was just 13 seconds, which brought DPS to 48,484. So still slightly less damage than Hezen despite having an extra round, but with all chambers doubling up on rockets, this makes DPS very impressive. Okay, so now let's take a look at Hezen Vengeance again, but with Witherhoard. Damage from the rocket launcher remains the same, while damage from Witherhoard consisted of an initial impact of 1063, followed by 17 ticks at 5439. This means total damage from a single Witherhoard round has the potential to reach 93,526. There was also a second Witherhoard round fired, but only with partial damage. This did 33,697 damage. Therefore, the total for the test was 761,458. For the method, start with Witherhoard and 1 round fired at the target, switch back to the rocket launcher and fire 5 rounds from that. Now, for this, I reloaded and switched back to Witherhoard, but in hindsight, it might have been best to switch to Witherhoard first and then reload upon returning back to Hezen Vengeance. Regardless, after the second grenade from Witherhoard, you'll have now just 2 more rounds to fire from the rocket launcher. Total time for this taken me 17.77 seconds, meaning DPS was 42,851. And finally, tomorrow's answer with Witherhoard. Damage from the rocket launcher remains the same, and the discussed Witherhoard numbers do as well. While the second round was fired from the grenade launcher and the total times different for this test, the damage for that second Witherhoard round is the same as Hezen at 33,697. That's because, as I've already said, with Hezen, I probably should have fired a second round from Witherhoard before reloading the rocket launcher, as tick damage had stopped by that point, but instead I did it the other way round, and it has negatively impacted the damage, but it's not by too much. Anyway, back to the current weapon. Total damage for tomorrow's answer and Witherhoard came in at 757,519. For the method, start with a round from Witherhoard fired at the target, and then switch back to tomorrow's answer. Now empty the first 3 chambers, which will be 6 rounds, then back to Witherhoard for 1 more round from that, and finally back to the rocket launcher to reload and fire the final 2 rounds. Total time came in at 14.62 seconds, meaning DPS was 51,814. So, with the main bulk of the numbers out the way, a table is coming onto screen now of every rocket launcher tested over the current season and the previous season. You may notice I haven't included anything with Breach and Clear, which is because, as I've said, I want to start separating away from seasonal mods as they do go away soon. Not to mention, they'll probably all just be grouped together at the top anyway. For any rocket launchers on here that haven't been tested in this video, there are links in the description for their own videos when they were tested. Just remember that we have had a nerf to frenzy damage since the start of the season, so a couple of early videos might be before that. Anyway, time for the graph. Starting with, well, all the Deathbringer examples. I'm not showing the timing clip preview in sync with the graph here, as because of how I've had to test it to maintain a little consistency, the damage from the orbs wouldn't match the graph, so it's pointless. However, I will be doing that for the other 2 rocket launchers. So, as you might expect, Deathbringer on its own at the bottom, followed by Deathbringer with charged with light mods, and although that only opens up the gap due to more damage on the opening 2 rounds and a slightly faster reload for the first 2 as well, after that you may notice they run quite parallel to each other. Once Breach and Clear is used, there's a huge jump, and once Breach and Clear is paired with the seasonal Argent mod, there's another huge jump in damage from around 5 seconds forward, which continues to open up until the 2 stacks of charged with light have depleted. at which point they're both now just breach and clear and also run parallel to each other. For anyone wondering what the small vertical line is on the breach and clear examples, this is just a round from Truth Teller doing damage, which based on my timings for this test happened roughly midway into orb damage. Now, these results are all quite obvious. What were you expecting between these four? So let's see how it looks when we start to bring on the other two rocket launchers, starting with Hezen Vengeance on its own. And it actually does well. Due to that opening delay from Deathbringer, it's not until 10 seconds, or more realistically 13 to 4 seconds, that a base Deathbringer in my test pulls ahead. Of course, total damage and for long periods of sustained DPS, Deathbringer has the potential to easily outmatch it. Tomorrow's answer now, and this initially falls behind Hezen due to less damage per round, but as time goes on, the benefit of 2 rounds in each chamber starts to show, and around 8 seconds it pulls ahead and never falls back behind. This actually manages to stay ahead of Deathbringer for the entire time it's firing, but that's only really because it's not firing for that long, and Deathbringer has a huge delay before it starts to do damage. Hezen Vengeance and Witherhoard now, compared to this weapon on its own, it has a bit of a delay at the start due to firing from Witherhoard, but almost immediately catches up and just starts to begin to mingle. It's not until roughly 7 seconds where this combination pulls ahead of itself on its own and never really falls behind. DPS isn't much higher, although I have a part to play in that, yet total damage is roughly just over that of a whole extra rocket. And finally, it's tomorrow's answer with Witherhoard. The lower damage per round, like before, gives it a slow start, but it very quickly starts to recover, having the most damage of anything at around 6 seconds. It then slowly climbs above all other examples so far, except for Deathbringer variants, which the longer we go on for will always catch up. Now, this leads me on to the elephant in the room. Deathbringer can do incredible amounts of damage, but it's slow to get started due to that initial delay. But what if you can accurately predict when a damage phase might start, or there is no damage phase? A powerful champion appears and is stunned immediately by a teammate, for example, to stop it from moving, and that happens as you fire. Well, 2 lines are coming onto the graph now for Deathbringer on its own, without that delay, and Deathbringer with breach and clear and charge with light. And now suddenly things change. I've taken 3 seconds off for Deathbringer on its own, and 2 seconds for the latter. It's now only at around 7 seconds where Deathbringer on its own pulls ahead, and for the most part stays ahead, and a mere 3 to 4 seconds for Deathbringer with the seasonal artifact mods. This really transforms the weapon when you look at it this way. But with all those inconsistencies, how viable this is to achieve in game is a totally different question. Now, I'm going to remove all Deathbringers with artifact mods and talk about Hezen Vengeance with overflow. This is a trick I've seen other people do, so I am in absolutely no way taking credit for it, where you can use a special ammo finisher in a densely populated area of enemies, create a cluster of special ammo bricks and run over them one at a time as you fire the last round in the chamber. When done right, you can continue to fire from Hezen Vengeance with no requirements to reload. So the clip and line coming onto the graph now is just that, without a single reload. I've done it this way, as impractical as it may be, but you still get to see the difference between it and starting with 2 rounds in the chamber, followed by the normal single rockets with reload. It's basically the difference between best and worst case scenarios. I'm not moving around as I've used editing software to simulate it. And at 87,120 DPS, this actually makes it the best in the entire test. How possible this method is though, I don't know. I haven't actually tried it. The numbers were done more out of curiosity. If you only manage to fire 4 rounds without reloading, which is very easily achievable, then you're somewhere in between, for example. So, Deathbringer and thoughts. Well, you need to remember to take these numbers for the weapon with a very large pinch of salt. I've taken the time for orbs to do damage from a single clip and applied it to every area of the test. And while DPS could possibly go up by 5, maybe even 10%, it could very easily drop as low as 60%, for example. Yet, despite the fact there are so many influencing factors for this weapon's damage over time, some controlled by the player and some not so much, such as orb travel inconsistency, orb tracking inconsistency, the angle that you're aiming at, the position from left to right that you're aiming at, the time at which you detonate the rocket, the size of the target, the movement speed of the target. I've thoroughly enjoyed using it. Forget the graph and that delay at the start, it's a fantastic weapon in my opinion and makes short work of almost anything. Admittedly, I haven't taken it into difficult end game content yet, but still, I think it's really good and it's unique. And that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not already, and give me any feedback in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.